Welcome everybody. We have 93 participants, which is really nice. I'm Milan Janicek from Charles University, and I will be presenting on this session, what is open science, on this webinar, along with Jochen Apel from University Heidelberg and Richard Dennis from University of Copenhagen. First, we'd like to say something about 4EU Plus Alliance, which was the basis for this cooperation in which we created or prepared this webinar and the others that will follow. As you can know, 4EU Plus is Transnational Strategic University Association. It's cooperation of 6 universities: Charles University, Heidelberg University, Sorbonne University, University of Copenhagen, University of Milan, and University of Warsaw. There are different things going on in this alliance, but one of them is that we work together on promoting open science. And we found out that 4EU Plus is a very interesting platform for this because we have very similar goals. We all work with open science topics. It's similar, but yet everybody do it in their own way. So we decided to make it more to get equal open science support on different universities, and we also decided to prepare this series of webinars, which are taking part in the first one, and we will see that this cooperation will be very helpful for everybody. Today, we will talk about open science in a very generic way. We will talk a bit about open science and the scientific method, about open access and future of scholarly publishing, then a little bit about fair data principles, which are important as well. We will mention education and skill research integrity, new topic, European Open Science Cloud, which will be important in future years. And we will also touch another new and interesting topic, which is citizen science. Now, I would like to hand over the floor to Jochen Apel, who will tell you more about open scholarship and open publishing.
Yeah, hello, everybody. A very warm welcome also from my side. It's great to have you all here and to see so many people interested in open science topics. And I'll start this course today with a little introduction, and I want to start with a short disclaimer right from the beginning. So, of course, not only in the title of this seminar, what is open science, but in the title of the overall training session series we set up here within our project, you always find the title or the word open science. But of course, we just want to make clear right from the beginning that we won't talk about open science in the narrow sense that science, meaning the natural sciences and life sciences here, but we are talking about all kinds and all fields of research. So maybe open scholarship or open research would have been the better term actually, because it's also about open research practices in the arts and humanities or in the social sciences. Nevertheless, of course, open science is the term which is frequently used in all these kind of discussions, be it on science methodology or also science policy making. And so we'll stick to open science for the rest of the course, but please be aware that it's about all fields of academic research. Yeah, and just for the start, I want to invite you a bit to think for just a couple of seconds about your particular field of research. So there are a lot of people have signed up from all different kinds of disciplines for this. So we have people with backgrounds in art history, for example, or in economics, in cancer research, in theoretical physics. And of course, all the research you do in your particular field, these kind of research activities, they might differ in very very many ways, but nevertheless, you can think for a couple of minutes about what it means for your research, or how your research or research in your field can be carried out in a way that its results are reliable, transparent, and comprehensible, or that it is understandable and accessible to other people. How can research be carried out in your field that there's confidence in its results, and how can research be performed that new insights can be found, and that these kind of scientific progress takes place as quickly as possible. And as I said, since all of you come from so many different disciplines, I'm pretty sure that the answers you might give might also differ from each other. But I would bet, I mean, as a librarian, you don't earn so much money, but I would bet a lot of money on that if you would write down the answers you would give to these particular kind of questions, the term openness will be somehow be part of the answers you would give to these questions posed on the slide before. So you could think a bit about why this is the case, and I won't do that on the next slides. And I think that is the case because the idea of openness is very closely tied to the scientific method and to the way research is carried out. And you can illustrate this by looking onto different philosophers and also other theorists of science. I will try to do it today with the aid of Karl Popper, eminent Karl Popper, and some of his very basic ideas of what constitutes science and what constitutes a scientific method. And yeah, Popper has it, besides all of the ideas you all know about, his ideas about falsificationism and all this kind of stuff, that science is, in particular, science is public in nature, or is a social enterprise. So one of Popper's main points in his philosophy of science that is that research is nothing individuals can do, but science or research is always some kind of social activity. And why is that? Okay, according to Popper, that is the case because only in this social setting or as a social enterprise, only if science is carried out in that way, something like scientific objectivity can emerge, whatever objectivity, of course, might mean. That is the case because individual researchers, that's the way Popper puts it, individual researchers are in love with their particular models, with their methods, with their theories, and they will stick to them with all of their strength. And that is why, in order to have scientific processes, you need some kind of public control and criticism by third parties. This is a necessary condition for something to qualify as scientific. And because that is so important, Popper has it that you need to have institutions which make this kind of criticism possible. And according to Popper, these kind of institutions are laboratories and journals and scientific congresses, so where you can come and put your hypotheses on the table and present your arguments to your scientific communities and to your scientific peers and get criticized by them. And that leads us to the topic of open science. The main question behind, for me, the main question of open science as it is discussed today is how do these kind of institutions, also Popper mentions, change over time? And in particular, how do these kind of institutions, and this may sound a little simplistic, but I think it's the right way to pose the question, how do these institutions change if you have the internet? If you have something like the internet available to you, how should you perform research with this kind of medium at hand. And that really leads you to the idea that open science is not something which is a new thing coming up now, but it's really something. It's just taking the idea of what constitutes the scientific method or scientific methods seriously, given the internet. So open science is just science done right with the means of electronic publishing, data sharing, and all these kind of possibilities which emerge if you have new digital technologies at hand. Yeah. So what is open science about? Open science is about opening up scientific processes and products from all levels of the scientific process to everyone. So it's about open access. That's the most maybe the most prominent discussion. So here it is about the scientific publications and why they are behind paywalls and whether it could be done otherwise. It's about open research data. It's of course about also open research software, open source code. It's about open methodology, which can mean different things like opening up your electronic lab notebooks, for example, also for third parties. Also, if you are from medicine, the idea of pre-registration of clinical trials is some kind of open methodology element within the science process. It's about open evaluation practices like having open metrics, for example, for bibliometric analysis, or having something like open peer review. It's about also getting citizens involved in research processes. So we will hear about that also later during the presentation. So it's about citizen science. And I also put open licenses here on the slide because open science also has a crucial legal dimension on any case. So it's about the reuse of scientific materials, and therefore it's also about proper licensing of research products, be it data or source code or publications. So, and during this introduction here, Milan, Richard, and I, we will touch upon some of these aspects. And then, of course, we have 13 follow-up sessions in this training session series. And so you can learn about all these aspects of open science in more detail during our series of open science seminars. So this today will really be not more than a teaser or something to make you some appetite for more. So open science, of course, discussed in many areas in scientific communities, in policy papers. And we decided to use this science policy paper by LERO, the League of European Research Universities, to provide the structure for our presentation today. So this LERO paper identifies 8 dimensions of open science, which are listed here on the slide, and we just pick on 5 or 6 of them today to give you some idea of what open science is all about. So I will start to talk a bit about the future of scholarly publishing in the beginning, and then after that, Richard will go on and tell us a bit more about the fair data principles. If you want to talk about the future of scholarly publishing, you must go a bit to the past of scholarly publishing, to the early 2000 years. And that is when the discussions about open access to scholarly publications really became prominent, and this kind of publication model really became a thing apart from particle physics, where open access has been a thing since the early 1990s. And from that time, you have various important declarations and definitions of open access, and I choose to point you to the Berlin Declaration on Open Access today, because it really has some important points in it related to the overall discussion on open science. So when you want to read what is open access according to the Berlin Declaration, you find Open access contributions include original scientific research results, but not only these, but also raw data, metadata, source materials, digital representations of pictorial or graphical materials, and scholarly multimedia material. The authors and right holders of such contributions grant to all users a free, irrevocable worldwide right of access to and a license to copy, use, distribute, transmit, and display the work publicly, and to make and distribute derivative works in any digital medium for any responsible purpose, subject to proper attribution and authorship. And these really are the two important aspects of open science over all fields where you can find the discussion. It's about free access to products of scientific activity, but it's not only about this, but it's always about more than this. It's always about reuse. And that is why the legal dimension is so important. People shall not only be able to look at your data, but they shall be able to take your data and use them and make something new out of it, or to check whether you did your research sound. Now, talking about open access in particular, it means lifting the paywall behind which most of the scholarly publications are hidden. Or also today, this is still the case. So it's about thinking about how can I make my publications open access, and most of you might be aware that there are different ways of how you can publish your research open access. Often these ways are framed by the terms the golden road and the green road to open access. So the golden road basically means the primary publication is released on open access. So the publisher's version you can find on the publisher's website, for example, is openly available to anyone. The green road mean that preprints or postprints are made openly available via suitable repository services. So with regard to green open access, you might be aware of the very popular preprint server. It's called the Archive. It comes originally from particle physics, and is a preprint server which is very frequently used for all researchers in the field of physics, but also mathematics or information science, computer science, and stuff like that. Really, the standard mode of publication if you are a particle physics physicist. So in particle physics, I don't know, 99% of all papers are available open access via this archive services. But there are also different kind of services. So if you are from a and also this has some uptake in other disciplines. So disciplines like biology or medicine are also starting to have these kind of preprint servers. So the bioarchive, for example, for biology. But there are also, of course, disciplines which don't have this discipline-specific services around, but there might be other kind of services. So, for example, if you are from France, from the Sorbonne, for example, you might know about the HAL repository, which is a national open access repository available to researchers from French higher education institutions. With regard to gold open access, the main discussions today, which are really important to shape the future of scholarly publications, are about business models. They are about the question how to finance the publishing infrastructure we need, because obviously publishing open access is also associated with some kind of costs, and you need some kind of business model how these costs are covered. So the most prominent business model here is, of course, having publishing fees, so having article processing charges or book processing charges. But it's also about, for example, having huge agreements with publishing houses, so-called transformative agreements, which try to shift the subscription budgets of the library libraries to central open access budgets. And there is a lot of discussion going on at the moment about this kind of transformative agreements and how these should be spelled out, and whether it is a good idea to have them, or whether they will perpetuate some kind of the problems we have with the academic publishing market. And so if you're interested in this, I really can recommend to join the follow-up webinars on these kind of topics. Already the second one will touch upon all these kind of discussions related to this. There are other business models around as well, for example, membership models or some kind of pledging or crowdfunding models. And of course, we also have non-profit publishing infrastructures in this field. In particular, we have non-profit open access university presses. So your universities also start to provide infrastructures for electronic publishing in open access to you and to other research communities. And so this is really a short thing we would really recommend, or recommendation, that you go to your particular university and to the website of your universities and your local libraries to check which kind of infrastructures and support frameworks they have for these kind of things. So, for example, I took 3 screenshots here. On the left side, you see a screenshot from Charles University. They have several agreements with commercial publishers in place where you can get discounts on these kind of publishing fees for your open access publications. In the middle, there's something from Copenhagen. So in Denmark, there's a national agreement with the large publishing house Elsevier, where which covers all Danish, at least as far as I understand it, all Danish publications with Elsevier, and they are put to the open access automatically, and the costs are covered by this general framework agreement. And on the right side, you find something from Milan. They have an open access publishing fund, and if you have to pay a publishing fee, you can make an application there that the costs are covered centrally. And of course, these are only examples. We have such kind of publishing fund also in Heidelberg in place, and the same might be true for the other universities where you are from. So check your local websites and you will find stuff there. And also check your local institutions whether they have their own open access publishing platform. So for example, Milan has an very elaborate open access publishing house. They are publishing around 50 open access journals, for example. And we are also doing that in Heidelberg. And we have an Heidelberg University Publishing, which is an open access university press, publishing journals and monographs in the open access model. And this is here also just a short teaser or short example to show you what we are trying to do here, because since you remember, this section was titled "The Future of Scholarly Publishing," and I am still talking about open access, which is discussed since 20 years or so now. What we really try to do with Heidelberg University Publishing is that we also try to produce enhanced publications in our open access publishing house. Not only PDF files which imitate print books, and these PDF files are then available open access, but we really try to make use of the possibilities the electronic medium brings with it. So we try to integrate videos or animations or other multimedia assets into our applications. We try to apply, for example, controlled vocabularies or other ontologies directly to our publications, or we try to link publications directly with the underlying research data to produce publications which are more than imitations of printed books. Because if we talk about the future of scholarly publication, that is really the way I think it should go. And just to finish this section, I said discussions about open access are going on for 20 years or so now, but it really now is the case, at least for Germany. If you look to journal articles published from German authors, it is the case that more than 50 or maybe more than 60% of these articles are available in open access right now. So it is the case now that open access is on its way to become the dominant publishing model, at least for research articles. And that brings us to the question that when it goes to the future of scholarly publishing, it is not the question any longer whether we want or we will publish open access or not. This case is already decided. So the future of scholarly publishing will be open access publishing. But the question is really how this open access landscape will look like and how we want to shape it. And that is something which is really an interesting field of discussion, and something, if you also think it's interesting, you really should sign up for the next seminars too. And that was the part on publishing, but of course there's no publishing without underlying research data. And that's why I hand over to Richard now, and Richard will tell us something about the FAIR data principles and how they fit into the open access landscape.
Thank you, Jochen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, good. Hi, I'm Richard Dennis, and I'm here representing the University of Copenhagen. And my topic is to whet your appetite on a very important component, a very important pillar, a very important dimension of open science, and that being the FAIR data principles. I am not going to go so deep in the FAIR data principles, but I encourage you to, after you have heard a little bit about the FAIR data principles, to sign up for our research data management DMP course on FAIR data and FAIR data principles and data management plans. So this is what all of you can expect as you embark on your new role as potential PhD students, potential researchers, potential people interested in research as it relates to research data management. Here, a little graphic to discuss with you what the FAIR data principles are and the new policies as it relates. Can you attend this seminar? No, sorry, we have a new policy. You first need to donate your data so it can be open. And of course, there's a box there relating to open data. As my colleague Jochen has been discussing, open access is a way to make scholarly publications and data sets open, available to the public for scrutiny and verification. Likewise, is the same as it relates to open data. And as you can see there to the right, there is the research data management workflow cycle. And two very important components of the research data management workflow cycle is the reusability of data and the ability to share data. I won't focus so much on the other items in the workflow cycle, but when it comes to the ability to make your data available to be shared and your data to be used, you'll find that the FAIR data principles are very, very important components to that. So what is the FAIR data principles? Very intelligent men, unlike myself, in 2016 came up with what we call now as the FAIR guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship. As my colleague has said, Jochen, it just doesn't pertain to scientific data management. It pertains to all domains within research. But for this terminology, I have used the principle for scientific data management. This was published in the Scientific Data magazine or journal, and since then they have gone on to become the important touchstone for long-term data management of research data of all kinds. The FAIR authors intended to provide guidelines to improve the findability, the accessibility, the interoperability, and reusability of digital assets. Digital assets can include anything that has either transformed into digital objects or is digitally born. These principles emphasize machine actionability. For example, the ability to automate computational systems to find, access, and operate and reuse data with minimal or no human intervention. As humans increasingly rely on computational means, and the computational means could be simply Google search and means to discover to work with data as a result of the increased volume and complexity and creation speed of data. So these FAIR data principles are broken into 4 components with 15 facets, and I'll speak a little bit briefly on what the facets are. But for the F, which is findability, data management and data produced needs to be enriched with metadata assigned with a unique identifier. And a unique identifier could be a PID, which is a DOI, which will allow your data to be found through a unique nomenclature, which is a DOI number or uniform research indicator. The A, which is the accessibility, data and metadata stored in a trusted repository with open and free protocols accessible by machines and humans. The I relates to the interoperability, and the interoperability meaning using vocabularies and public domain ontologies that describe the metadata which can be referenced and that can be linked. And the R, which stands for the reusability, or to be reused, additional documentation and protocols describing the acquisition of the data license with detailed provenance, so that in the event that you want to reuse this data, certain licenses are used, certain licenses are available, which gives you the permission to reuse the data and the data sets that was published and produced by the researcher. As I said, there are 15 different assets as it relates to the FAIR data principle. The F with the 4 assets to be findable means metadata is assigned a global, unique, and eternal persistent identifier. The F2 data is described with rich metadata, and the F3 metadata is assigned, is registered and indexed in a searchable resource, and the F4 metadata specifies the data identifier. This is the first letter in the FAIR data principle. In order for data to be accessible in the A, metadata is retrievable by the identifier using the standardized communication protocol. The 8.11 protocol is open, free, and universally implementable. And the A1.2, the protocol allows for authentication and authorization procedures where necessary. And the A2 metadata is accessible even when the data is no longer available. And the I for making your data interoperable describes what format, how it's accessible, how it's shared, and broadly using applicable language for knowledge representation. The I2 in this facet uses metadata, uses vocabularies that follow the FAIR principles. And the I3 uses data, includes qualified references and other metadata. And then lastly, the R, which is the reusability of the data. Metadata has the plurality of accurate and relevant attributes. And the R.1 releases with, it's released with clear and accessible data use language. And the R3 1.12 metadata is associated with their provenance, thereby being the licensing, allowing you to use and reuse the data. And the R1.3, it meets the domain relevant community standards. For instance, each domain may have different vocabularies that relate to that domain. So you're going to be using the ontology, you're going to be using the domain-specific community guidelines and standards, which will allow you to describe the data, which will allow the data to be found and thereby be reused. Again, this is a very top level, high level, 30,000 feet description of the FAIR data principles as it relates to creating data or creating principles around your data and data sets. It'll be more described at the later workshops that will be held. There are 4 things to keep in mind to properly understand FAIR data and the FAIR data principles. 1, both humans and machines are intended as digesters of data. What does that mean? That means that this will lead to the creation of an ecosystem that is fast to respond to the changes, automatically adapts to the new findings or changes, the internet FAIR data and services. This is the reason for focusing on standards for data identification mechanisms and data availability. The next point is that the FAIR data principles apply to both data and metadata. Where metadata is described of records about data, this is why the terms metadata is stated in the principles. The third principle does not necessarily mean that data is open. You can work in a fair manner with data that is not intended for public availability, meaning that you can create your data using the FAIR data principles, but doesn't necessarily that your data is going to be open and available to the public. The last thing to keep in mind is the FAIR principles are not rules and they are not standards. The FAIR principles must not be taken for rules or standards that you can use to evaluate tools, data policies. This would soon make the principles out of date, inapplicable. Should we adopt this as rules and standards? Adopting the FAIR principles will often be gradual, adopted over a period of time through your work routine and through gaining knowledge of what the FAIR data principles are. But it can also be a huge leap where you replace one typical infrastructure with another. It will often take different research areas and research communities to make the FAIR principles work for their respective communities. Here's a little graph that kind of gives you a graphical representation of the FAIR principles as it relates to FAIR, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. As you can see here in the F, findable would mean that you have to have a persistent ID. In order to be found, you would have to have rich metadata. Also, the index data in the data that's being deposited in a repository would need to be indexed, and the PIDs that describe your metadata, which links up to your data and data sets, would have to be persistent. The accessibility, in order for it to be accessed for future generations, you would be using what would be commonly called standard protocols, open, free protocols, not proprietary standard protocols, but open, free, accessible protocols. And when necessary, authentication. And lastly, for the accessibility, metadata was always available. And for interoperability, meaning the ability to see whether or not this works for the data in which you are looking for, and the fact that you could be using certain standards, whether it's a CSV or versus a proprietary standard, like maybe SPSS or something. You'd be using standard communications, you'd be using standard vocabularies, and the vocabularies that you'd be using would be considered to be fair, following the fair data principle. And the fact that this data and the metadata would be linked in an open data process. And the reusability, the metadata here uses multiple attributes. Also usage licensing, Creative Commons license, provenance, meaning you know exactly how the data was acquired and the process by which you analyze the data. That information should be made available, and utilizing certain domain community standards. So, in summary, in order to utilize the fair data principles to make sure that your data is fair, you can see that if your data is published searchable information online, link and cite your published data sets, manage managed access to file in the published data sets, define the rights for reuse of your data, and describe your research data, and to use open file formats. So why is this important? Why is it important to use the fair data principles? It has been discovered through Collins that researchers who have used the fair data principles, their publication, their outreach, and the impact has, for example, the data has received more citation per the Spark European report, and moreover, fair practices have had a high economic return in the long term and opened the door for citizen science when increasingly important policy objectives. And the last thing I'd like to say is, as a policy way forward, is as it relates to the fair data principle, is the data and data sets should be open as possible and close only when necessary. Thank you.
So if you will stop sharing the screen, I will take sharing myself, and thank you. I'll continue from here. So we have talked a bit about publications, and we have talked about data, and now let's talk about people, which is another important part, because people are important, of course, as well in this, and it's everybody should be reminded that it's not really just about the result, but it's about the process as well. And you can't really have open research or open publications, open data without people who will be able and willing to prepare them. Generally, you can say that really the researchers hold the key to opening the research. So no one else can really take this key from them and do it for them. So they need to have some educations and skills, because as you can see mentioned here, open science brings new opportunities, but also some challenges. You can divide these skills probably into two groups. You can acquire new skills yourself as a researcher, or you can get support from your university. It really depends on your own view, but probably the right solution would be a combination of these two. If you think about open science skills, we can see 4 main groups. There are some skills related to open access publishing. There are some skills related to data management and opening the data. There are also skills enabling professional research conduct, which is also part of this problematics. And there are some skills related to citizen science, which is new emerging topics in this area. If you just think about what are the skills needed for or related to open access publishing, people should know where to publish, to decide which journal is good, which really is very, very bad. People should know how to auto-archive, because there is some potential at auto-archiving which should be really used. They should think about how to improve societal impact, because they are not doing just research for themselves. They would like to make some impact. Contracts with publishers is important topic as well, because people are sometimes willing to give so many to the publishers for free, and it's very difficult to work with this problematic after some contract is signed. People should keep in mind that there are some new publishing methods as well. You can hear about preprints and some specific services, for example, from European Union, when you can publish on this platform and just go around the systems with journals altogether. Licensing and copyright is something that's, again, it's maybe complicated topic, but it's important, because when you have something that has some value, licensing and copyright is important to do it right. Not only not like for making money from it, but not to get the rights taken away from you as an author. And bibliometrics and research impact reporting, it's interesting for people as well, because they may be evaluated based on bibliometrics and current ways of research impact evaluation. Yeah, they need some change, and they probably will be changed a bit with regard to open science. And again, we will have different session for this. That was the first part. The second part, skills related to data management. You could imagine probably that there are many quite difficult topics to grasp, as we were listening to part about fair data. So you can expect that people should know something about domain-specific formats, standards, and tools. They should know what's used in their domain and what are the right way how to do things in their domain. Data management is important as well. This includes planning, because when you plan your research and you plan your work with the data, you can really get closer to having fair data in the end. Interesting and very much requested is also data analysis. When people would like to analyze their data correctly and get as much from them as they could. And And from this open science perspective, it also includes some potential for reproducibility, because, yeah, I will tell you about reproducibility in a few minutes. There is some way needed to describe the data, with metadata. So this data will be findable according to FAIR. And it's, again, something that people should know how to do. And people should also know about institution-specific workflows, if there are any. It's very important in some domains, again, with specifically with data protection or personal data. There may be some policies which where an institution would like to have data provided as open as possible, as closed as necessary. And people who work with the data should have some idea that this is really in place. And data citation impact, yeah, it's not really the most important thing now to have data citations, but especially, or for example, in our university, data citation isn't the thing yet, but it will be, and you should have the data prepared in a way that they will be citable. It relates to this usage of identifiers. So from the skills enabling professional research conduct, there should be some skills about the research management itself, how to manage everything in the course of your project. Again, there are some legal skills needed. When you work with licensing, you work with some intellectual property, both as users and as creators. It's again, in some domain, it's very complicated how to get really, for example, data from some sources, and there are some legal skills needed for this as well. And research integrity and ethical skills, that should be very like same for every researcher. We probably have seen all of us some cases of plagiarism, or maybe plagiarism, or it became a topic of discussion that probably nobody wants. Sensitive data management is also important in this case, because you don't want to be the source of stolen private data about somebody. And this is, again, all these areas, and it needs to be like kept in mind. One last note I have here is the most cases when there are some problems with research integrity are cases of neglect rather than fabrication, but still you should be ready to avoid these as possible, as much as possible, as soon as possible. Then we mentioned citizen science, and it will be mentioned later by Richard, but there are some specific skills you need there as well. There is research design, because the data's involvement of citizens makes things very, very different. And you also need to engage with the people who are cooperating with you, and you need to do some communication. And there is importance of building relationships and trust. But it's expected that a better or higher involvement of people should generally improve trust in the sites when they have some chance to work a bit closer to scientists. Well, this was a really extensive list and a lot of things to do. I think it's important to mention that you can't really expect that everyone will be expert on everything. So there is this part I mentioned in the beginning, when you have some skills that you should learn to do some things yourselves, but there also should be some support from the universities or your institutions where you work. So it's more about cooperation than just learning everything. But you still need to know or be aware that there are some requirements, and you should think about it. And if you need some help, you should find someone who can help you with it in these areas. It doesn't automatically mean that, especially with these new topics, that every university will have everything in place. But even if they don't, it's nice to, or important to have that there is some problem that should be solved by the institution, and it really shouldn't be everything put on the researcher, because everyone can be expert on everything. So what to do? Be aware of new requirements, check support provided by your university, and be ready to undertake training in some areas. Because as I mentioned before, on the other hand, it's not possible that some support will solve everything with your research. There still will be a part that you will have to do by yourself in regard of opening or open science problematics. So next part is research integrity, which is mine as well. We have 4 principles of research integrity: reliability, honesty, respect, and accountability. I think, from my point of view, that open science and all these openness is very strongly related to first 2, reliability and honesty. When you are ensuring the quality of research, and it's reflected in the methodology, analysis, and use of the resources. And honesty is, well, if you open everything, and everybody can check what you are doing, even years after you finished it, it should really improve both reliability of your results and honesty in science in general. The other parts are somehow connected as well, I would say, but I see the strongest connection here in the first 2. There's the question if there is a reproducibility crisis. It depends on the domains again, but the discussion which is going on is how large part of research output is not really reproducible. And there are many studies in recent years in different areas which are looking into that. Interesting question with regard to open data is if the data for this research are available, or if they even do exist. That's something that should be, this problem should be gone if really everybody would switch to producing fair data and working in a way that their research would be reproducible. You may know there was this in journals of old, I would say there was this sentence that data would be made available upon request. It may be difficult to give somebody data upon request, because people in the teams are changing, and if you are not really ready to do that, it may end up to be very, very difficult thing to do. And on the other hand, if you are creating data which are trying to follow fair principles, you don't really have to put much more effort to sharing your old data. Because if they are fair, or they were fair 2 years ago, they still have some descriptions in them. They are structured for publishing, and they were created in a way that it really helps this reproducibility. So the fair should help with this as well. And there may be other problems with too complex experimental designs, for example, which are difficult to create, or some human-related reasons that somebody makes some mistakes, or maybe some malicious. It's difficult sometimes to really set one from each other. So, and you probably would like to avoid this as well, to be just that somebody would think that you are doing something wrong. And if we look on reproducibility and open science, so the open science provides these things: sharing of methodology and sharing of data. We didn't mention really sharing of methodology, but it's a different part of open science, this reproducibility part. Sharing research software, which you used for your work, is important as well. There will be a session on this as well in our webinar series. Licensing is important. The things should be available as openly as possible. So again, reproducibility should be held by this. Regarding publications, there should be some open peer review process. So this thing will be more transparent. And there should be some rewards and incentives regarding creating reproducible research and testing reproducibility of existing research. This is another quite a big topic, because somebody would have to modify rewards and incentives, and it will take some time. But even research that is created right now may be in the future evaluated by this new criteria. So it's not really too early to start with this. If we see now some requirements from European Union in projects, they are asking about like following open science in the previous projects. So it's not really clear how, in all cases, how these rewards and incentives would like, but it's still something that should people keep in mind and be ready for the future evaluation. So, and that's generally the final part of this reproducibility part. You should keep research integrity and reproducibility in your mind when you are conducting your research, and you should try to create and provide fair data. The thing is that once you put something out there, it can, and if you wouldn't do things correctly, or you would, you may cause problem for yourself or for your future self, because these things are very difficult to fix later. And so you should really keep research integrity in mind all the time. Now we can go to different part, which is European Open Science Cloud. And Richard will again take the floor and tell you more about this topic.
Hi again. I'm going to talk in this section about two things: the European Open Science Cloud and citizen science. And the European Open Science Cloud is a very ambitious undertaking by the EU. And what they are attempting to do is to take all of the communities, and the communities are too varied to discuss. But the ideal is to take all of the communities and to create this federated solution. And so it is a European Commission initiative aimed at developing a federated infrastructure for providing its users with services that is designed to promote open science practices. Its aim to develop a trusted virtual federated environment that cuts across borders And when I mean by borders, it means from country to country, and scientific disciplines, and that means non-scientific disciplines, humanities, the wet and dry sciences, so scientific disciplines to store, share, process, and reuse research digital objects like publications, data, and software, following the FAIR data principles. And that's the core of what the EOSC is, the European Open Science Cloud is. It is about allowing all of the research objects creating the ability for these objects to be used following the FAIR data principles. And that's the core of it. It brings together institutional, national, and European stakeholders, initiatives, and data infrastructure to develop this inclusive open science ecosystem in Europe. The ideal behind this is extraordinary, and right now we are literally in the middle of this whole process. It started some years ago, and now the community, along with the European Open Science Cloud Association, they're embarking on implementing what's called the STRIA, which is the strategic initiative, which will allow the framework to how to implement the European Open Science Cloud over the next 7 years. The expectation is that this will lead to new insights and innovation, higher research productivity, and improve reproducibility in science. This is the hopes of the European Open Science Cloud, bringing all of these communities together to create this phenomenal community of European Open Science Cloud. One of the services that is already available to the community, to researchers, and those interested is what's called the European Open Science Portal. And the portal right now it's a gateway to information and resources within the European Open Science Cloud. It is part of the European Open Science Cloud implementation roadmap, and as one of the expected federated cores, which is the set of services providing the means to discover, share, access, and reuse data and services. The federated core services contributing to the implementation of the access and interface action line. This has been conceived by the European Commission, but through delivering channel connecting the demand side and the supply side of the European Open Science Cloud. Basically, it is a portal that allows you to access services, a catalog of services and marketplace, which acts as an entry point to the multitude of services and resources for researchers. If you indulge me here for just a second, I can give you just a small demo of it. And as you can see here, this is the welcome page. So we will browse through the catalogs, and you can see here, these here are the various scientific domains, medical and health services, engineering and technology services. And then there's the generic domains, humanities, the agricultural sciences. This is, here is the some of the communities that are involved in the catalog and marketplace. The providers, its target users. You get to browse the various resources. So here's the different communities, different providers. All of the resources. From the accounting framework, open data platforms, some portal services. Use cases, depending on what your domain is, whether it's in artificial intelligence, BBC, Elixir. These are the various community use cases. Let's get back to the catalog and marketplace. Let's see here. We go in here, engineering technology. We get to see some of the resources. Data care, object and storage. If you're in need of storage, this will be a good place to look. But as you can see here, as it stands now, this is the portal of different catalog and different services and marketplace. So that's sort of a small sampling of the European Open Science Cloud as it relates to catalog and marketplace. The governance from 2021 to 2027 is based on a tripartite structure, which includes the EU countries and the countries that are associated with the Horizon 2020, which represents the EOS Governance Board, which was agreed upon earlier this year. You can see here, here's the model with the European Open Science Cloud Association, the Commission, and the Steering Committee. It is this tripartite structure with the association steering it for the next 6-7 years in deciding which direction the various which direction the European Open Science Cloud implementation will go. Just a little bit about the next steps for the European Open Science Cloud and its federated service. There is four different working groups. I'm sorry, 4 different task force, and the task force is broken into various working groups, and they tackle topics from through sustainability, through ontology, fair data, fair metrics and data quality, implementation, interoperability, fair use, and rules of participation. All these, the architecture, authentication, all these various things that relate to where the European Open Science Cloud will go once they are ready to release it and make it available to the public. It has gone through various phases, and this last phase being the 2021-2027 is where the European Open Science Cloud Association starts to talk about how to implement this particular document, this TRIA document. Again, I won't go so deeply into it. It's just to give researchers an understanding of the catalog and marketplace and the services that are available on the catalog and marketplace via the Open Science Cloud portal. Next, I will talk about really quickly about citizen science. What is citizen science? Citizen science can be described as the voluntary participation of non-professional scientists in research and innovation at different stages of the process and at different levels of engagement, from shaping research agenda and policies to gathering, processing, and analyzing data and assessing the outcomes of research. In very simple terms, in citizen science, scientific projects are carried out with the assistance or completely by interested amateurs. Citizen science formulates questions, reports observations, carry out measurements, evaluates data, and or writes publications, compliance with scientific criteria as a prerequisite. Lastly, this not only makes new scientific projects and new findings possible, but also enables a dialogue between science and society that is otherwise impossible or even difficult. There are roughly 10 principles of citizen science, and these 10 statements came via a working group called the European Citizen Science Association, led by the National History Museum in London, with input from many members of the association. It set out some of the key principles, which as a community, they believed underlying good practice in citizen science. I won't go into all of it, but I'll go with the first 2 or 3. Citizen science projects actively involves citizens in scientific endeavor that generates new knowledge or understanding. Citizens may act as contributors, collaborators, or project leaders and have meaningful role in the project. Citizen projects have a genuine science outcome, for example, answering a research question or informing conservation actions, management decisions, or environmental policies. Both the professional scientists and the citizen science benefit from taking part. Benefits may include the publications of research output, learning opportunities, personal enjoyment, social benefit, satisfaction through contributing to scientific evidence, to potential influencing policy. And citizen science may, if they wish, participate through multiple stages of the scientific process. This may include developing the research question, designing the method, gathering and analyzing data, and communicating the results. This is where I'm going to stop to give the audience time for question and answer. But we will make this presentation available on Zenodo so that you can look at some of the examples and also look at some of the 10 principles of citizen science. And I also provide why it's important, the relevance, effectiveness, the creativity and quality, transparency, science literacy, and confidence in public research. And I provide the examples, 3 examples of citizen science that can be read at your leisure. And then lastly, I provide the bibliography links to the FAIR data principles and bibliography to citizen science. So with that in mind, in my abridged presentation on European Open Science Cloud and citizen science, I will stop sharing and open the floor up to potential questions.
So now we have time for some discussion, maybe. I'm not sure if we had any questions in chat, or if there was just the one that Jochen answered, honestly. Or if you would like to ask anything right now, you may even both raise your hand or write something in the chat. But as we went through a lot of different topics, it may be a better idea to just hope that you were inspired in some areas and that you will be interested to know more and to more in a more deeper webinar. So we have here the next sessions, which you can see. Hey.
If no one else has a question, I would have. I have one. I have a question to Richard. I'm sorry, but
for me,
no, it's just because I think this one is the only webinar where we have the European Open Science Cloud explicitly as a topic. And so I was just wondering about this, the portal and especially the marketplace for services which are available right now. So are there any specifications which services are included there, for example, with regard to the business model? So if I look for a data archive or storage infrastructure, will I only find public providers there or non-commercial ones, or is it also open for example, for commercial IT suppliers and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's to answer your question, you'll find private providers on the open science on the marketplace. You'll find all kinds of different services. There are some services that's readily available, and they're already providing services to researchers from their interface. Some of them just basically have a front page where they are still developing and implementing the services in the marketplace. There's a rigorous process that they have to undergo before they actually start to provide the services. But the ones that are there have been rigorously have gone through the process. So they are either public services, private services. Some of them come from institutions. Some of them come from nonprofit organizations and for-profit organizations. And they are some of them are domain specific. Some of them are non-domain specific, basically domain agnostic. It's just literally a multitude of services that are being provided. And I would say that they're adding services on a regular basis. So if you're looking for something today, you might find in a month or so they'll be made available in a month or later. But this is one area of the EOS that is continually being developed, continually being enhanced, and is sort of the first phase of of the European Open Science Cloud. There'll be a much broader services made available on a federated basis, after the association and the task force has done the work, which we have just started basically a couple of weeks ago.
So in the meantime, we got a question in chat. So maybe Jochen, would you like to answer it? Or
I mean, I can say something, but also Richard, if you want, or maybe I start and Richard, you can add on this. Yeah, I think that's a good question. So the question in the chat is how open science to general data protection regulations. So protection of, for example, personal data and stuff. If you want to share interview data or only and things like that. And I think that's an important question, and especially if you have of course, only if you have data where some kind of specific protection rights apply. So, for example, personal data, but also if you are in literature research or so, copyright issues might arise. For art historians know this particularly well, for example. So, and the simple answer is, of course, open science can only go as far as the general legal framework allows it to do. So you have to respect all the data protection rights, for example, and there might be data you cannot make openly available. So that is why Richard stressed, so data shall be as open as possible, but as closed as necessary. But, and that's one important aspect, I think, it is important to think about open science in a holistic way, or always have open science in mind during the whole research process. Because of course you might be able to share your interview data also if it's interview videos or stuff with people inside, if people agree to do so. So if you get some kind of consent, you might be able, of course, people can later on take this back, and that may cause some problems. But the important lesson, I would say, is think of these kinds of possibilities to open up research products right from the beginning, because if you have an informed consent and people agree that you share the interview, for example, you might be able to do so. But if you don't have the consent right in the beginning and you only think about it after 2 years when the project has finished, you might not be able to go back to the participants of your study to get the consent. So, yeah. But of course, legal regulations are in place and have to be respected. Richard, do you want to add something?
I don't have much to add in that area, and except as I read the chat question, can you share interview data? I would say that there are. I'm not going to say you can share it. I'm not going to say you cannot share it. I'm going to say that GDPR is fairly specific about what you can do, what kind of information that you can make available, and what kind of information you cannot make available. So, and one thought is anonymizing it. So if there is no way that you can attach that interview to a particular person or entity, then you are in compliance with GDPR. But if there's no way you cannot anonymize that, or if there is a way that a person or persons or groups can be identified, then you are in violation of GDPR, or you would be in violation of GDPR if you made that information available. I would also say that there's this question about metadata. and the description of making, potentially making these transcripts available. You can certainly describe your interview in metadata, meaning that you describe the metadata and you secure the data so that it's not made available to the public, and then afterwards you have the ability through repositories that have this functionality. You can validate the person or persons or groups who may want to have access to your interview data. There are many ways to make this information available, but I would also stress that you would have to be in compliance with GDPR, meaning it's just not something you just would not make this information available through any open repository without first checking with GDPR requirements. That would be my my additional thought on that.
Thank you both. We don't have any other questions, I think, but this was the example of things that can, or maybe some. Okay, this is just response. So this may be example of what we can do for you. Is this part of the support? And you can see that we are trying to think about these questions on every university from 4U+. And there are some people you can try to contact, and you may ask them how really the support looks like for open science on your university. I would advise you to check the web page with registration, and you can see contacts for all universities. And if you are interested in any topics which are discussed here now, or any topics that will be discussed in the future, you can contact the people from your university there, and yeah, you can actually use the alliance to communicate these things together as well. So feel free to get in touch with us. And if there are more, okay, that's generally no more questions. So here you can see this three next sessions. Will be more specific. Some of them will be very interesting, especially because there will be some things that are not discussed, for example, on our university, and you can see this topic in these sessions. And with that, check the webpage. We will send you some feedback form and a link to the recording, I guess, and we will be very happy if you fill it in and tell us how did you like it, and which part of open science seems to be interesting for you, and which part you would like to see more, know more. So with that, if we have no more reaction from my colleagues, we would like to thank you for your attention and for coming here. And we hope that we will see you again on some of the next sessions that are part of this series. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice evening.
Bye-bye, thanks.